Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and today I want to tell you guys a simple tale of one warlock that wanted to climb the Tower of Torghast, and how you went from a lowly warlock, playing Demonology, playing with a blueberry, pulling mobs like a pure weakling, to an actual ascended god commanding 5 tyrants. This is going to be the story of my warlock run to Torghast floor 72. Now, for all of you who are not sure what the hell Torghast is, it's a new feature being added into the next expansion of World of Warcraft, the Shadowlands. In the Shadowlands, you'll be able to do this somewhat dungeon/island randomized experience of this tower climb of Torghast, where enemies grow stronger and stronger the higher you climb. It's a roguelike experience where every single level there will be enemies and treasures to loot that'll give you anima powers that enhance your character in different ways, grant you different abilities, multiple talents that you may be able to pick from your character, and other bonuses like simple stats. But to a whole nother level where you're just overscaling this content. It starts out tough, but as you scale better, with a little bit of luck, you might even be able to craft some crazy cool new build, and you'll be able to ascend the tower. On the alpha, we don't have the final version of the Tower of Torghast, well, at least not yet. Hopefully, this will be a more complete product in a few weeks and will be more akin to what it's supposed to look like on live, because right now it's very punishing. It's really designed for us to test different floors and difficulties. We could test the easy floors, which is floor 1 to 13 or 14. From there, we could test floors 14 to 25, which are called the medium difficulty, and those both are still doable as just about any class. However, on the hard mode, you need a lot of RNG in order to scale and outscale the experience, because if you get very unlucky, collect a couple bad anima abilities, there's no way in hell you're going to be able to make it all the way to the highest level. It's a very challenging experience, and on the alpha, certain specs and classes just don't feel that great because they're not finished, so in a sense, it's a bit of a punishing experience, but it's also very enjoyable and super fun. The biggest difference of how it is on the alpha and live is, in live, you will be able to start at level 1, and it's intended that you'll be able to climb to level 13, then 25, and then past, and all those anima powers that you have collected, you'll get to keep. But on the current alpha, all we have is just the hard mode, where you get thrown into the deep end, enemies are hitting extra hard, survivability is very unlikely, unless you pick up some random powers that are going to be insanely strong. So it's really just RNG, but for the live version, it should be more of a structured experience. And this is going to be my tale of how I was able to reach on Demonology Warlock the highest possible levels. Just how hard is this experience? Well, on my Warlock, for a good portion of very powerful enemies, I had to keep them CC chain in the corner, otherwise they would obliterate my pets or myself in just a few casts. And being a Demonology Warlock, you don't have every utility in the book, from interrupts and hard CC that lasts for 5 seconds, so you really have to deal with what you have. So majority of my time playing up until, 6 or 7 in the morning, I spend majority of that time, at least in the earlier levels, while I'm super weak, just locking out enemies by fear locking them in the corner, and then hoping that a dot of corruption will do enough damage over time. But eventually, this patience that I had, it all festered into a powerful being by the end, so it was definitely worth. But over time, you do get to ascend higher and higher floors, pick up different powers. And what did my Warlock become? Well, I actually recorded a little bit of that earlier in 7 in the morning, talking a bit about my build, and I'll try to edit it so I sound as coherent as possible. But if you wondered what my build ended up being and which abilities I got first, well then, here goes that footage. Take a look at my Warlock. He actually ended up having a lot of stats. We have 200% critical strike, a lot of haste, a lot of mastery for the pet damage, and very little versatility, but I get a lot of the versatility every time I summon my demons. Also, I summon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tyrants, which is part of the build, increasing my versatility by 500%. So there's a lot of different pieces that are in play whenever I am playing this build, but these tyrants last for quite a while, and they'll all increase the duration of all the other demons active. So this is a very interesting build. When it comes to my anima powers, there's a bunch of them that I end up picking up, but of course I end up maxing out Oblaron Venom as soon as I really started to pick up speed. Anything that also gives you any kind of procs like Lightning Dust, that your abilities have a chance to do random lightning damage, have helped out tremendously, especially because Demonology just doesn't have any damage at the very beginning. Because I'm going for a crit heavy build with Oblaron's Venom, capping out my maximum amount of critical strike was going to be key, and I just kept stacking it afterwards. Because of all this crit chance, I also can go for Lens of Elkavir, which I think is how you say it. Whenever you critical strike, direct attack, your arcane bolt will also strike an enemy dealing extra arcane damage. So you have proc damage, crit damage increased, and also you have corrupted antenna, which also put up quite a bit of shadow damage over time. Also another proc. For my sustain, I ended up picking Spatter Shield, however you say it. Your Dreadstalkers contributes to 2,000 or more absorption of your Soul Leech, which meant that my Dreadstalkers could essentially maintain me and all my demons alive by themselves. I also was able to double up on my Dreadstalkers, and I'm not sure. Oh wait, there it is. Mark of the Borrowed Power called Dreadstalkers has a 45% chance to refund 2 soul shards and reset its cooldown, so I was able to get 3 or 4 sets of Dreadstalkers back to back to back, and the earlier you get this, the more immune you can feel as a Demonology Warlock. Plus I picked up Ethereum Sensor. This was really good early on. Healing received increased by 100, but holy damage and healing done reduced by 75. So holy damage and holy heals, since I'm a Warlock, I do none of those. This was an awesome pickup. The biggest thing that I figured out for my Warlock is to, first of all, use the Blueberry. I know normally you would want to go for the Felguard since that does more damage, but in the early levels, the Tower of Torghast is actually almost impossible. At least, I would say it's almost impossible for Demonology Warlock. I think there's only one other spec that's worse than Demonology, and that's maybe a Shadow Priest in Tower, but Demonology has it really, really rough. So, that's a little bit unfortunate, but I ended up finding out that a lot of the enemies at this hard difficulty hurt my Felguard really, really badly, and they just obliterate him. He does good damage when it comes to a DPS race against, let's say, an elite enemy, but when it comes to survivability and just pulling multiple enemies, because sometimes you have to, the Blueberry does a much better job. I know I'm losing out a lot when it comes to playing Demonology. The only time I've had to swap to Felguard is once I really started to get ramped and my damage was a lot higher. To be able to beat the elite mobs before they had their stacking buff reach 10, I had to swap to Felguard, and then it was a DPS race. But eventually the Blueberry just started outscaling, and he now holds 500,000 health, which I picked up a buff called Pact of Infernal Intimacy. Essentially, every time I maintain a pet through level by level by level, they have more health and more damage. It says on tooltip 0, but his health does keep going up more than just Pact of Thickness, because he's a big old thick boy. But I think this does actually work, but it doesn't have any damage increases or health increases on the tooltip. So I've had this guy, and he started stacking up Pact of Infernal Intimacy. I did not want to lose the buff, so I just kept him from there. He ended up working out pretty well. Some of the other buffs I liked is Ethereum Weights. This was actually really cool, and you're not able to jump, so if you love mobility, you just won't be able to. But picking this up as early as possible increases your stats heavily. Another one I picked up was Ultimate Detainment. I've used this before in another run, and it's really, really powerful. However, I didn't need to use it on this run whatsoever. I picked it up because there was not a lot of other options. So I would say for Warlock, especially as Demonology, you would want to play the OG playstyle that you have currently in Battle for Azeroth. Get your Felguard, start doing damage, but when it comes to the enemies that are in the tower, nothing really, just everything hits so hard. Everything just hits way too hard. All enemies are just obliterating your pet. He does have a little bit of threat extra, but he just cannot take the damage some of these elite mobs have. And this is the biggest problem with us testing this in the alpha. We get to test just how hard the enemies are, but we don't get to test what is intended to be the original way of how you're supposed to do the Tower of Torghast, which is you start at level 1, collect a few abilities, you move on to the medium difficulty, collect a few abilities, you move on to the hard difficulty, collect a few abilities, and then you can just keep going forever and ever and ever and ever. So we are playing like a weird version of this, where it's mostly there for testing, but the way you have to play it is essentially go into the hard difficulty, see if you pick up a few good abilities to get lucky. If you don't, you have to reset and try again. So besides being very RNG, if you were to actually have a legit experience, starting from the easy level 1, towards level 10s, the 20s, and then onto the 30s, picking up abilities as you go, I definitely could see this be a lot better in terms of an experience. But the way that it is right now for testing, it needs a little bit of luck in order to get going. but definitely doable as a variety of different people playing a variety of different classes, from priests to mages to warlocks to demon hunters, are all ascending the floors. If you are in the alpha or in the future beta for this, definitely save up all your currency and buy plundered animal cells from the vendor. Shackle Broker is great. He'll offer you a lot of extra power. He has other powers that you can just boost your character for if you're going for like a mastery build or a versatility build or a high crit build or just insane haste build, but definitely buy the plundered animal cells whenever possible. It'll give you a pretty big boost in terms of your power growth. Here's a pro gamer move. You can use the Ravenous Anima Cell that he sells, which turns a non-elite enemy into an Anima Cell on him. And he'll always reward you the currency, which you can use at a later vendor at higher levels in order to buy even more upgrades. What's really cool about the Torghast experience is how every run can be different. My run ended up being, very luckily, a high crit run, where I'm just doing increased amounts of crit damage. I have abilities of proc off of my crits, eventually gaining 100% crit and increased crit damage. Summoning a bunch of pets that will just tear through my enemies, pets that provide their own variety of buffs, and simply just overpowering the enemy, what I would imagine a Demonology Warlock would really do. The tower experience is really cool because it can really take the imagination of what a class could essentially do to a whole nother level, in a very Diablo-esque format of massive numbers and just outscaling the living hell out of your enemy. And every class has multiple different runs that could be done. Every spec has different builds that could be good for. And depending on what abilities you get in the tower, which are all different in their own ways, you might even be able to swap to a different spec so that your build might work better for a certain playstyle. So I find that very, very cool. I find the randomness and the variety that you can get out of every experience awesome, and the experience itself of climbing the tower after your character really gets the ball rolling is very addicting. It is so difficult to put the game down and you just want to climb every level until you hit the wall. But hitting the wall when it comes to trying to defeat difficult enemies isn't the end all. Just dying inside of this new experience isn't the end like it would be with Visions. You actually get different amounts of attempts depending on how many people you're running. So with one person you get 3 different attempts on a floor. If you die 3 times, a powerful being that resides in the Tower of Torghast is going to come knocking and will try to kick you out. He is kind of difficult, and Blizzard have said that he's supposed to be unbeatable. Well, it is possible to slow him down at most so you can make it to the next floor, but if he starts overpowering you, in a sense it just soft locks you to the point where you have to give up on your run. This is the highest level that you can hit. So there's multiple different ways of dealing with these floors. You can fight through all the enemies, you can stealth right through them, you can try to get around them and try to see if you can bypass them, and as long as you make it to the end of the level, you can move on to the next. So trying to balance out just how far you want to explore, what different objectives you want to accomplish, which rooms or which enemies you want to fight. I think it's going to be very interesting when it comes to live. It's going to give a player just a repeatable experience that you can do multiple times over, all in a single sitting. And there's so much variety, so much variance that is done for this, and definitely a lot of care that have been put into this. Like, Blizzard decided to take all the best stuff that make the addictive nature of the Diablo 3 and the seasons, and the whole thing behind the seasons and different abilities and the playability of the content and the scaling difficulty of it all, and basically baked it into World of Warcraft in a way that doesn't really make you think, oh yeah, this is just like Diablo. You're still playing World of Warcraft, you're still doing all these WoW things, but there's just extra bit of creativity, and it's actually very, very enjoyable, or at least I found it enjoyable. I could definitely see someone look at Tower of Torghast and see it as a bit of a gimmick, because, you know, we've never had something like this, but like Mythic Pluses, like raiding, like certain mechanics, I hope this is going to be a piece of content that, if it is good, and if Blizzard continue to improve on it and try to expand on it, could be something that we might walk away from Shadowlands with. Kind of like how back in Legion we walked away from Mythic Plus dungeons, or from WoD we walked away from Mythic dungeons in general, or even the idea of Mythic difficulty starting in Mists of Pandaria. To get back to my Warlock and his journey, one of the coolest things that I saw with the anima powers is the fact that you are able to unlock certain anima powers that will give you talents. Similar to how we had class rings back in Legion, we had those rings that gave you a ability to access a certain talent just for wearing those rings. So you could, in a sense, have multiple talents in a row selected at the same time. And that's essentially what I think allowed my Warlock build to really start scaling. I was able to, on one hand, have stronger shadow bolts and stronger demon bolts, which did incredible amounts of damage, while also being able to run a nether portal. So I can start summoning demons from the twisting nether directly. I can take on the Demonology Warlock puppies and start summoning them in multiple successions, and I'm able to go through every single talent that buffs their damage, the AoE damage, as well as the single target damage. They leave a nasty debuff on my enemies, and when I summon up the tyrants, their Shadow Flame damage just does increased amounts, which it already crits and does extra crit damage. So as soon as I get my tyrants up and running, I can literally AFK and kick back. We also haven't talked about the carrying ability for Warlock, which is essentially a very strong dot. I was able to really upscale it, so on a single target, it's probably the strongest dot I have ever put on an enemy. One thing I noticed with my build, and I've seen other people run Torghast, they're able to get their numbers in certain builds where they're able to use one ability to just decimate an enemy in a single global. For me, I wasn't able to do that. Maybe it's just the nature of a Demonology Warlock. You have a variety of different pets that all do a little bit of damage, but the more of those pets you have, the more damage you do. And all those pets crit off of one another, and all those crits can proc different abilities, so I guess it worked out in its own way. It's just a lot of little hits during a very limited amount of time. With my Warlock feeling super powerful, I decided, you know what, I might as well just go all the way from floor 66 and work my way just an hour or two extra just to finish up to floor 72. And I did it. So going for floor 71, this is what my experience was at the very beginning of the floor. I need to go and feed my health to my blueberry, because every time he resets on the floor, he just, for some reason, his health resets. So I have to kind of get him back up to speed. And then from there, I'm just summoning demons in just hordes and hordes and hordes. Honestly, I kind of started feeling like Gul'dan at one point, because my imps, even my basic imps that in normal PvE situations do barely any damage, even those little guys, if they do get to cast off abilities, you know, if they even get a cast up before my base abilities global the enemy, those guys end up doing a ton of damage too. But it was actually super fun and awesome to just see how creative you can be with builds. I mean, nothing feels better than pressing summon tyrant and 5 tyrants every minute come up, empower all of your pets to be there for about a minute. So there you are with all your pets flying out of portals, the skies, the ground, crawling out of every corner, just swarming the enemy in every possible way, feeling like the Burning Legion incarnate. Made floor 72, which is supposed to be the hardest floor on the alpha, kind of a joke. But with characters being scaled super high, just about everybody is able to one-shot the boss when you're just doing this much damage and just have this much overall stats. But then it came to the end. That was the end of my Warlock run to floor 72. I think for future class stuff, I don't think I'm going to be doing hard floors, because majority of that experience is going to end up being getting lucky on a really good anima power. I'd rather go and check out some of the anima abilities, so for future videos on Torghast, I think I'll just do them on medium difficulty, so we can see all the different creative ways that you can modify your character with this tower experience. The hard mode is just too RNG, and it really comes down to getting lucky whether you'll have a successful run or not. And I'm not really interested in doing stuff like that, especially in the alpha. I'd rather play this experience in its full once we have a more finalized testing session, so you can really see how high you can scale with your character with all those other previous powers. But overall, I had a blast with Tower Torghast. Honestly, some of the coolest experience ever. I'm yet to do one on Mage or Priest, so if you guys want me to do one on a Priest or Mage, and I'll do an actual recorded run talking about all the different abilities and my experiences live and just kind of putting the best parts together, let me know, because I ended up doing this in the middle of the night and kind of just having to record after. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think about the Tower of Torghast and my run on my Warlock, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.